Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Milsurp World, the podcast all about military surplus. I'm your host today, Aaron, and today we're joined by Danny and our guest, Cuno, from Switzerland. Say hi, everybody.
Hello. Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, yeah, it's good. It's good to have you on, Cuno.
Thank you.
Danny, you invited our friend here. Why don't you...
Sure did. Yeah, it was our mutual friend, Hamish from New Zealand that mentioned you. He asked me, he was like, hey, would you mind having somebody from Switzerland on the show? And I was like, oh, heck yeah. Great.
Yeah, I saw Hamish from New Zealand on a podcast, and I thought, wait a minute, I don't think there are too many Hamishes from New Zealand that are into collecting military surplus. So I knew it was my friend.
Yeah, probably not. Nice. So the question that we ask everybody on the show is, how did you get into Milsurp collecting? What's your specific story in Switzerland?
Well, basically, in Switzerland, military service is mandatory. So I started basic training in 1991 and was issued a Sturmgewehr 57 as my personal rifle. And that was the first, that was my first firearm that I had, not the first one I had fired, but the first one I had training with. And to be honest, I wasn't really into guns that much back then, but that was my first one. And then later, my father had a small collection of firearms. And when I inherited those, that got me really going.
Oh, nice. Was it a lot of military surplus firearms that you inherited?
Well, there were some. There was a Steyr Mannlicher 1895/30 Stutzen that he kept in an umbrella stand in his bedroom. And he also had a Mosin 1891/59 that I think some friend sold it to him, and the rest, he had some Smith & Wesson revolvers, and the rest wasn't really military surplus.
Yeah. Well, I would say, starting at, with the M91 and the M95, you can pretty much only go up from there.
Sure. Of course. Of course, I really got into Swiss rifles later because, being in Switzerland, that was the easiest way.
Yeah. So I'm guessing, Swiss rifles I have heard, but, K31s and the whole Schmidt-Ruben line and everything are very, very inexpensive over there. Is that right?
Yes, they are. They are. I mean, dealers charge between $100 to $200 for a K31.
Wow.
But if you buy them from private sellers, you can get them even cheaper. It's pretty easy to get them for $50.
Oh wow, I don't even think they've ever been that cheap here. The cheapest that I've heard that a K31 used to be, years ago, was like $200 something.
Well, you have to understand, to most people in Switzerland, those are just dad's or grandpa's old rifle. And they usually sit in the basement or in the attic. And there are a lot of people, they had them sitting there for decades, never used them, and they're just glad to get rid of them.
Oh yeah. I think the U.S. market is really starting to appreciate Swiss straight pulls. K31s in particular, they've gone up a lot. And about 3 years ago, they were around $400. I think you could get a K31, but now it's I think it's around like $600, maybe even $600 to $700, depending on condition and everything.
Yeah, that's pretty expensive for Swiss standards.
Yeah.
I mean, in Switzerland, if you find a private edition K31 that's been upgraded with diopters and target sights and everything and has a perfect barrel, you may have to pay $400. But that's as expensive as shooter rifles go. I mean, there's some anniversary models that can be over 1,000 francs, but then you're getting into collecting really rare anniversary models.
Yeah, wow.
I didn't even know there was anniversary models.
Yes, there was one made for, don't even remember now. It was for maybe 60 or 70 years, K31 or something like that. SIG came out with a limited edition at the time, and those are, extremely nice and quite expensive.
I didn't even know those existed.
Yeah. I think the consensus on Swiss guns is kind of split in the U.S. With like the current market price here. When they were like $400, I used to think that they're very underpriced just by going on what other Milsurp rifles go for in the U.S. You can even like a beat up Mauser, like maybe like an M48, which are usually up, but the lower end K98Ks and stuff like that, around like 500 to maybe 600. So I always thought that like a nice, 31 400 was a little bit underpriced. So I think, the market kind of determines where it's going to be. So I think it's more accurate maybe now being at 600, just because they're really high quality rifle, and they're a great shooting rifle and everything.
Oh, absolutely. It's actually, it's nice that a lot of people internationally appreciate our rifles and enjoy them. But on the other hand, a lot of old Swiss rifles are leaving Switzerland every year. I know of several exporters, and they export, thousands of rifles every year. So
Danny and I know of one particular importer in the United States that specializes in Swiss firearms, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they set up their company. I think they were a part of they're the company that sold the Chris Vector, if I'm remembering correctly, and then they set up a export company specifically just for dealing with arms from Switzerland.
Yes, I'm familiar with the company. That's a company that bought Sphinx, Sphinx pistols.
Oh, yeah.
And and those were they actually they were located about an hour from where I live, and they made very high quality pistols, and it was really unfortunate that they got sold off.
Well, if what you're saying though is in Switzerland they're basically thought of as obsolete and cheap,
mm-hmm.
then this importer in the United States is making out like a bandit then.
Well, I'm going to tell you one thing that will blow your mind. Dealers in Switzerland will give you exactly nothing for a K31 or for a K11 or for a G11. If you have one sitting at home and you want to get rid of it and you take it to a dealer, they will tell you, okay, we'll get rid of it for you, but we're not going to give you any money. So a lot of those rifles that are being exported, those dealers pay nothing for them.
Wow. How do they get the seller to agree to nothing?
Well, it's pretty easy. If you want to get rid of an old rifle in Switzerland, you have two options. You take it to the police, and they will dispose of it. Those rifles, or also pistols, of course, they will get shredded. They will be destroyed. So they're actually always asking people, to turn in firearms they don't use anymore. It's voluntary, but a lot of people do. You see, it breaks your heart to see those pictures in a newspaper of people just throwing perfectly good rifles in a dumpster. You see P210 pistols in there. Last time I saw somebody who threw away a Zielfernrohr Karabiner 55, just threw it in a dumpster with the scope, everything.
Literally in a dumpster.
Yes, to be destroyed. And so people, they don't know that they could still get some money for those rifles, and a lot of a lot of them, they inherit them. They don't know what to do. They maybe they don't want to deal with the police, so they call a dealer, and the dealer just says, "Oh yeah, bring it in. I'll dispose of it for you." But they will not give you money for it.
Wow.
What a racket.
Wow.
Well, the thing is, there are only a few dealers do even export rifles in Switzerland, because it is kind of difficult. It's a lot of paperwork. So most dealers they just figure that if they have to take the time to clean a rifle, and then maybe has some surface rust they have to take care of, and then they can sell it for $150, then it's just not worth their time.
I guess that's fair.
Okay, that's crazy. I didn't quite realize that there was so much of that. I think there's a little bit of that in every country. I think there's some of that in the U.S. Especially I think widows of collectors. The husband passes away, and so the widow will just get she just wants to get rid of this large collection. And
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard of anyone not getting anything for the guns.
Well, I do get them for free sometimes, because I buy a lot of them. I pretty much buy all of them as the price is right that they're offered to me, because for the exact reason that so many are destroyed or leave Switzerland forever. And in my shooting club, we have a lot of young people joining, and they seem to be interested in shooting carbines more than they used to be. So a lot of young guys ask me if I can get them a K31 for a good price, because they don't want to spend 200 francs for one at a dealer's.
Yeah, wow. What's the market like in Switzerland, the cert market for military surplus rifles not from Switzerland?
Well, everything else is usually overpriced. That's the problem. I was at a dealer just recently, and he had a couple of Mosins, and he had, I think it was also a Mannlicher 1895 there, and they were all for around $1,000.
Whoa.
Wow.
And Danny, I looked it up. The Swiss franc. Is it franc?
Well, Swiss franc is okay.
That's the Anglicanized way of saying it, isn't it?
Well, in the Swiss German about it's pronounced Franken.
Oh, well, I'm not going to try it. Franc. The Swiss franc is almost 1-to-1 to the US dollar. It's like 6 cents off. So when he's speaking,
nice. That's easy.
When he's speaking, guys listening, in terms of dollars and to francs, it's almost 1-to-1.
Yes, that's basically why I don't even bother making distinction between francs and dollars. So if I say francs or dollars, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So $1,000 for just a regular M9130.
That's the one I saw at the dealer, and it was in pretty bad shape too. It was not in great shape. So the thing is, dealers, they try to charge a lot for them, and then of course there's the market where collectors sell them to each other privately. They're better prices there, but they're still pretty high. The thing is, what I do, I think you mentioned that in the first podcast, Aaron, that it's also a budget question what you collect, and I'm the same way. So I don't really. I was looking for a Swedish Mauser for a while, and I don't even bother checking dealers because they're so expensive. I'm not gonna pay $1,000 for a Swedish Mauser. That just means it's not affordable to me. So I usually just wait, and I since I buy a lot of Swiss rifles, I'm in touch with a lot of people, and sure enough, some guy calls me. He has some K31 K31s he wanted to sell me, and he mentioned, "Oh, I also have a Swedish Mauser, and I have some other type of Mauser that's probably Turkish. Would you like to have a look?" And I practically ran out the door to go have a look.
Of course.
And so I ended up with it was in fact a Turkish Mauser, model 1938, and it was in pretty good condition, not perfect, but for Turkish Mauser it was really good. And the Swedish Mauser was just a regular 1896 Carl Gustaf, made in 1919, and not 100% numbers matching, but in really, really nice shape. And I got them for really cheap because I bought a few rifles from him, and so I basically just made an offer for all of them, and he accepted, and that's how I got a Swedish and a Turkish Mauser for a really good price.
Nice. So is the dealer prices, or is that considered overpriced in Switzerland, or is that the actual market price? And if you're smart, you just don't pay that.
Yeah, I guess it is the market price. But I just simply cannot afford to pay market price. That's the story.
Yeah, there's a lot of guns that I definitely can't market price for. I usually, like most of my K98Ks and stuff, I ended up finding at good deals or trade for or something like that. Because
it really depends on the dealer, and it depends on the rifle. Like Carcano rifles, for example, they go for between $300 and $400 at dealers usually. So it kind of depends what it is.
Even in Switzerland, Carcanos are underappreciated, Danny.
They certainly are.
Might be a reason. What do M95s go for in Switzerland?
He just said $1,000.
We did? Okay, I didn't hear it.
Yeah, I've just recently seen one that the dealer wanted $1,000 for it, but I would be surprised if somebody actually paid that
for a Bulgarian rework M95 34 in the United States. It's about $300 to $400. 400 is very good condition, like one of the ones they reworked right before they arsenaled them, and it's really good condition. I've only seen a couple of those, but I don't think the market's really, it's still soft on them right now because the ammo availability is still not really there.
Right, that's we have a problem.
Yeah, a few other reasons, Danny, sure, but it's the ammo availability, I think, is what's depressing the market currently.
If you didn't like them so much, I wouldn't hate on them so.
Whatever.
Drinking that haterade.
I don't hate Swedish Mausers. Why do I get targeted?
You should.
I should hate Swedish Mausers?
Yeah, it'll just add to the banter.
What can I be arguing about? Like, oh god, they're in a nice caliber and they're in good condition. What?
Exactly.
Oh wait, they have straight bolts, Danny, on some of them. Which is the god awful worst thing for you.
I can deal with a straight bolt on some guns, and the Swedish, they just didn't learn. They just didn't learn that the turn down bolts were the way to go. It took them a couple years, but eventually they caught on. Cuno, what's your favorite? I mean, I kind of have a feeling I know this already, but what's your favorite sort of nationality of firearms or military surplus?
Well, that would probably be Swiss.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I do like Swedish Mausers. I only have one, but I would like to get more. I appreciate Russian rifles. I don't have a lot of Italian guns, but that's just they don't appeal to me too much. And U.S. guns, of course, because there are so many of them.
Yeah, we made a lot.
Yeah, and also German guns. I kind of like everything that's high quality.
You're missing two big players though in Europe that are big players in the United States Milsurp market. You didn't mention France or the UK.
Yes, I do not own a French firearm, and it's not that I wouldn't buy one, but I haven't just come across one that was, that appealed to me and was affordable. As far as UK is concerned, I have a Webley Mark VI revolver, but that's the extent of my British collection at the moment. I would love to add an SMLE to my collection, but they're pretty hard to find and expensive in Switzerland.
About how much does a run-of-the-mill SMLE go for there?
I haven't really seen any recently, but I'd estimate that you'd probably have to, spend $500-$600 plus for one.
That's not too bad. I think that's about what they are here.
Yeah.
Depending on the make. Some of the I think like the Indian made ones tend to go for around $4. But fish made ones, especially Australian ones, the Lithgow SMLEs have really gone up in price lately.
Yeah, there just aren't very many to be found in Switzerland. That's the problem. And of course, dealer prices are crazy, as we have already discovered. And so to find one from a private seller at a decent price, I haven't really seen any recently. So I can only estimate prices.
I think this might be a good time to go into maybe the Swiss firearm laws. What goes into purchasing a firearm? How does private purchases work for you, or how does somebody get into it?
Sure. Well, there are different categories of firearms. Basically, the Swiss bolt action rifles, including hunting rifles and stuff like single shot rifles, small caliber stuff, is only requires a contract and a registration with police. So basically, you do a contract and then send a copy of the contract to the police, and it will be registered in your name. But the problem is that only covers Swiss bolt action rifles. It does not cover pistols, and it does not cover foreign, and by foreign I mean not Swiss, non-Swiss military surplus, because as soon as it is a military rifle, you need a permit. And in Switzerland, it's called an acquisition permit. It's basically you need the permit to acquire a weapon. You do not need the permit to own it, but you need a permit to acquire it. And pretty much anybody who's of age and has a clean criminal record can get one. It is I guess in the US you would say it's must issue. And so it's just a matter of filing the paperwork, and you can get it as soon. Of course, if you have felonies, then they will not issue you a permit.
Okay. Did you say you need it to purchase but not to own? You could have inherited?
Well, no. It's to acquire it. Inheritance is also mean to acquire the guns, and you have to file for permits for the guns you inherit. You have like, I think it's 6 months, and within those 6 months, you either have to sell them, to a dealer, to somebody who has the proper permits, or you have to file for your own permit to acquire them.
And there we go, Danny. That's why people get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah,
it's a bunch of paperwork, especially if it's a large collection.
That's right. They make it easy for collections, though, because an acquisition permit allows you to buy a maximum of 3 firearms from the same seller. And, every permit costs you $50. And if you inherit a collection, you're allowed to just tack on a list of the collection to one permit. And so you can get it on the same permit, which makes it a bit easier. But you're definitely right. A lot of people don't want to go through that. And so to get back to the category, so the acquisition permit will cover pistols, revolvers. As soon as it's a handgun, you need a permit. If it's semi-auto rifles, of course, they require a permit. Pump action shotguns require a permit, and lever action rifles require a permit too. So let's see. And then there are guns that are banned. That would be full auto plus, accessories like silencers are banned, like laser sights are banned. Night vision stuff is banned as soon as you attach it to a rifle, stuff like that. But you can still get it with a special permit. And those permits, those are not must issue anymore. You have to explain why you need a full auto gun, and it's usually, you have to be a collector to be able to get those permits.
Okay, so I guess you can't own suppressors. So Switzerland must be one of the few European countries that actually fully regulates suppressors. There
are others, though. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think you can just get a suppressor in Germany unless you're a hunter.
Yeah, we kind of talked about that with Hamish. Because I think in New Zealand, maybe that's like a British Commonwealth type of thing, but I think in the UK, they're not that regulated. In the US, they're very heavily regulated.
No, they're more seen as they're more seen as a safety feature. For hearing loss and stuff like that, because when we talked about this last time, especially in the UK, their ranges are indoors. Like they're in, some of them are even in old pubs. Like they have the shooting ranges inside, so you can't.
I'd love to go shooting in a pub.
Well, in Switzerland, you can get a permit for a silencer, but you have to explain why you need one. And of course, it's not as hard if you're a collector, but it's more difficult if you're a sports shooter, because in Switzerland they're very rarely used in shooting ranges. And I guess if you would frequent a shooting range that asks you to use one, you could use that as an explanation why you need one. But shooting ranges usually don't require them, so it's it's mostly it helps to be a collector to explain why you absolutely need to have one. And in Switzerland, unlike other European countries, you don't have to be approved as a collector to get those permits. You basically, if they see that you're buying a lot of firearms, because obviously, they can look in the registry what you own, and they can check how many permits you filed for in a year or so. And if they see, oh, that guy is buying a lot of firearms, and you tell them you're a collector, they will take your word for it.
Now, when you're registering the firearms, so the government knows what firearms you own then?
Yes, that is correct. There are a lot of unregistered firearms in Switzerland because the gun laws became more and more strict in last few decades. They were before 1999. They were actually, the gun laws were not federal. They were local. The Switzerland is a confederation of states, similar to the US. The states are called cantons here. And so before 1999, the cantons had their own gun laws. So in some areas you could, you could freely carry, concealed carry, open carry. There were no restrictions. In other areas, it was not allowed, and so the gun laws became federal in 1999, and they for until 2008 you could buy even handguns and semi-auto rifles privately without a permit. You only needed an acquisition permit to buy from a dealer, and they changed that in 2008 and made permits mandatory for all purchases for handguns and the ones I mentioned. And unfortunately, the Swiss gun laws became more strict last year because we were forced to adopt the new European Union Firearms Directive. That was pulled out of a drawer after the shooting in Paris. And even though Switzerland is not a member of the European Union, there are like open border contracts that compel us to adopt European Union gun laws. And so there was actually a referendum. We voted on it, and unfortunately, we lost the referendum. So now we also have some nonsense about centerfire semi-auto rifles and handguns with high-capacity magazines. And high-capacity magazines mean over 20 for handguns and over 10 for semi-auto rifles. And they're basically banned like full auto guns, but because the Swiss sports shooters usually use military rifles with high-capacity magazines, they had to make some exceptions and everything. So you can still get them, but now it's a different permit. They call it a special permit. It still costs the same as an acquisition permit, and you're still allowed to buy 3 from the same seller. But it comes with some strings attached. You have to, you have to either buy it as a sports shooter, and as a sports shooter, you have to file paperwork after 5 years and after 10 years to show that you've been regularly shooting your rifle. So, you basically, if you're a member of a club, they will confirm that you've been shooting, or you can go to a privately run range and they will confirm it for you. So you only have to do that, once after 5 years, once after 10 years, and you only have to do it for the first one you buy, and the rest, they're covered. And if you buy them as a collector, then you have to, you basically have to show that you have say that you have a safe, or that you can store them properly, and you have to have a list of all your firearms that you have to be able to produce, and the police can come by and check on you and check out your collection at any time. So there are a few strings attached now, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, it's unfortunate that you had to adopt the European Union law on that, especially not being part of the EU. But
with the exception of the sorry, just real quick, with the exception of the individual acquisition permits, it's not all that different, Danny, from having an FFL, a federal firearms license in the United States. I mean, you have to keep track of your purchases, your sales, and it allows them to come in and check on your stuff. But you also get benefits in the terms of the United States, where you can have, because you're a federal firearms license holder, you can have items shipped directly to your door.
Yeah, I think just the term like FFL, like federal firearms license in the U.S., is a bit of a misnomer. It's more. I think federal firearms licenses were never meant to be like mandatory the owning of guns. It's more like an exception to the 1968 gun control bill. It lets you do certain things that you wouldn't be able to do, after that law was passed. Like in other countries, maybe like the federal firearms license would just be you have to own it, but in the U.S. you don't have to have it to own it. But I do see what you mean.
It's similar though in terms of how it operates.
Well, not exactly, because the The difference being, excuse me, if you don't buy any firearms covered by the new law, if you stay away from semi-auto centerfires with high capacity magazines, you don't have to register as a collector. Wow. So at this point, because I stopped buying semi-auto with high capacity magazine last year, so at this point, until I start doing that again, I'm not officially registered as a collector, and they do not have the right to just come by and check on me.
Okay, that's neat then.
Now, when you purchase something, is there a waiting period, or can you also have stuff shipped directly to you, or do you have to pick it up from a dealer?
No, there's no waiting period, and guns can be shipped by dealers. They cannot be shipped by private individuals, at least not through the Swiss Postal Service. And most other package services do not ship firearms from private parties. So no, there's no waiting period. You can buy as many as you want. You can file for as many permits as you want. You can buy and own as much ammunition as you want. There are really no restrictions.
So a private purchase is pretty much then you just each show each other your acquisition permit, the way it works?
Yeah, it's basically the buyer shows up with the acquisition permit, which is an official document, and you have 3 copies, and you just fill it out, and you put the gun information down, manufacturer and serial number, of course, model, caliber, and so on, and then both sign it, and then the seller sends back the copy, to the police that issued it, because they're also issued locally in the different cantons. So the seller then sends back the copy to the police for the gun to be registered to the new owner. And it's basically also that the seller, if something should happen, if a crime was committed after the seller sold it, then you can show the copy of the permit and say, see, I transferred it to the other person at this date, and so it's not my problem, because you have 30 days after a sale to file paperwork with the police. So, within those 30 days, basically, if something happens, you have your copy of the acquisition permit.
So it's not a registry then, those guns. It's just you're turning in the transfer. Well,
no, it is a registry. It is a registry. It's they're also local, and a few years ago, every canton had their own registry, and they weren't really connected, so it was a bit of a mess. And then in the last few years, they connected them. They tried to do a federal registry, but that was voted down. So they then proceeded to connect those local ones. So, it is a registry, and police can access them. So it's kind of basically just the registration happens when the firearm changes hands, because there's still a lot of firearms, especially people inherit them. They don't know the law. They just put them somewhere, forget about them, and so they really only get registered once they change hands.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. So let's talk a bit about the import process of firearms into Switzerland. Have you done it, or have you heard of anyone that's done it? If you find a firearm that's for sale, maybe overseas or somewhere else in Europe, can you bring that firearm to Switzerland?
Yes, it's possible. I personally haven't done it because it's there's a lot of paperwork involved, and it's quite expensive. Basically the process would be you have to get an import permit from Switzerland. And with that, the seller could then get an export permit from his country. If it's a neighboring country, then your best bet would just be to go pick up the rifle if you have all the proper paperwork, because shipping can be really expensive for private parties. It's it's a bit easier for dealers, so you would probably go through a dealer and have the dealer handle the whole thing. But it's possible to do it privately. The problem is I tried to send a K31 to a friend in the European Union. And I looked into the whole thing, and getting the permits wasn't really that difficult, but finding somebody who would ship it is a problem, because the shipping company needs to be licensed to ship guns. And so I asked for a quote, and they told me that it doesn't really matter whether you ship one rifle or 5 of them, it will cost $500 to ship them.
Wow.
And so, in the end, it wasn't worth doing it, because that's pretty much the price of a K31 in the European Union is between $500 and $600. So you could just look for one locally, and I just didn't want to bother with the whole paperwork if it wasn't really worth doing. So I personally don't import them, but it would be possible if you have if you can go pick them up somewhere.
Okay, so that's kind of neat then. So you could, if you did all the paperwork, you could say drive to France, pick up something, and get back with it.
That would be possible, as far as I know. Yes.
Well, why would you want to be in France?
In France.
I had a question, Danny.
Right.
Now, I know that in Germany and in France they require civilian proof housings for the firearms. Do they do that in Switzerland too?
I'm not exactly sure what you're saying.
So they require, in France in particular, and in Germany, they require the firearms to be proofed by a proof house so that they are in the correct caliber and that they're also safe to use.
Yes. Okay. No, Switzerland does not do that.
Okay. We see them in the U.S. every once in a while when they come in, because they'll have extra markings on them, because they'll usually stamp the calibers. It's a requirement. Typically, they'll stamp the caliber, and then they'll also have the particular mark of the proof house to tell them when it was done.
Right. Yeah, they're not proofed in Switzerland, but if you import them, they need to put a import a Swiss serial number on them. So what you have to do if you import a rifle privately, you have, I think it's also 30 days, but I'm not 100% sure, to go to a dealer who is licensed to put that import serial number on the rifle. But that's all that's required.
Oh, so an import mark is a requirement. Okay.
Yes.
That's interesting. I just thought import marks were mostly a U.S. thing.
But you'd be happy to hear they can make exceptions for vintage firearms.
Ah.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, there's not an exception like that. They put big, ugly import marks. Like all these Swiss guns, these beautiful Swiss guns coming into the U.S. right now, getting these big, nasty electro marked markings, and I think it's done with lasers or something marked into the side of the receiver. Big billboards.
Yeah, I've seen those. That's really too bad. I mean,
yeah,
to see that on a Swiss rifle, it really it really hurts.
Yeah, my G11 has got a really big one on the side of the receiver, and otherwise it's just a beautiful gun. But it's just in the U.S. it's been getting the restrictions are getting tighter and tighter. It used to be you just had a little mark. They'd put on the barrel, just on the end of the barrel, and you didn't really notice it. But yeah, it's getting more and more strict. So now these new ones coming in are real ugly. Yeah, lucky. And my K31, the reason why I bought it was because it doesn't have any import marks on it. which is kind of rare because any gun that comes in is supposed to have them on there.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice.
Well, just like you said, Cuno, in terms of the people not understanding the legislation, when they started requiring, it was 68, right, Danny?
I think so, yeah.
When they started requiring it, there wasn't a huge amount of people that either followed it or they didn't understand the requirement. So there was stuff that still came in that should have had it, but didn't.
Yeah. I have a story from a friend of mine he's an older guy, and he used to live in New Jersey, and he used to live like right down the street from a major importer. I forgot the name. That was in New Jersey, and he got to know them all and everything. And they would get these batches of guns in. He used to get his his pick of the litter, pretty much. These guys, they would get like these nice, German like P-38s and stuff like that in. And they would purposely be stamping the guns, an import mark on it, but they would miss the gun and they'd hit the table and they would just kind of go, oh, oops, and they would just keep on going. It didn't seem like something that was very highly looked after. Sometimes they would just do a real light tap. Sometimes they would miss the gun and they just wouldn't worry about it. So I think back in the day, it used to not be a really big deal, but.
So, Cuno, if you click in the text channel above in Discord in Maine, you'll see the two kinds that we're talking about. And I actually even found a billboard mark on a K31.
Yeah, I see them.
Yeah, it's terrible. Weird thing is that as far as I know, as far as I can tell, it's not illegal to erase an import mark. So if somebody had the talent and know-how, could kind of remove, polish or something the import marking off of a glass. That's terrible. So people listening to this can't see this, but there's like a receiver of a K31. Of course, what does it say? K31 Swiss 7.5 by 55 CAI Georgia.
Well, see, it's the same company importing on both of them, and the basic information is the same, but the new requirement was it has to be a certain size, it has to be located on the receiver, and it has to have a serial number, an import serial number that's not the serial number on the gun. Don't ask me why.
Yeah, that's really too bad.
Don't ask me why they do that. I don't know.
Right.
It is.
Yeah, it's the same here with the import serial number. It has to be different than the serial number of the gun, and there were also some changes with the European Firearms Directive that more parts have to carry firearms now. So serial numbers, excuse me. So I'm not 100% sure how that works, but I do believe that importers now may have to put more serial numbers on different parts if they don't already have one. But I don't really know in detail how that works.
Are in Switzerland, are other gun parts heavily regulated? Like I think I heard that bolt pieces are regulated.
Well, yes, basically. The barrel is regulated, the bolt is regulated, the receiver is regulated. I think that's pretty much it. So if you wanna buy a barrel, you also need a weapons acquisition permit.
Interesting. So those individual pieces are considered a firearm.
Well, they're not considered a firearm, but they're considered what do they call them? Just the main parts, basically, of a firearm.
Okay.
So, say if you had like a Mauser and you needed to buy a new extractor for it, do you know if you would need like a license or something or a permit in order to an extractor?
No, not for an extractor. Not for the individual parts. No. I don't
know if that's all states. And I mentioned this because there is a specific YouTuber who is in Switzerland, and he had a Mauser that had an extractor that was just garbage. So because the extractor was bad, he would just claim that that Mausers were bad because it couldn't extract. And he said something about how he couldn't get a new extractor, couldn't buy a new one because of the law. So he ended up like filing and getting like some working on that extractor instead of buying a new one.
Well, I don't think it's so much a problem of Swiss law. It's more of a problem that a lot of, especially companies in the US, that will just refuse to ship anything to Switzerland.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm guessing, because they can't really know all the different countries' laws, so they just decide not to ship out of the country.
I know that feeling about living in a state in the United States where a lot of people don't like to ship to.
Yeah, Aaron basically lives in Europe.
It's not as bad as some other states.
So, where do you live, Aaron?
I live in Illinois.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I heard that might be a bit of a problem for gun enthusiasts.
It's similar to Switzerland. There's no fully automatic firearms. There's no silencers. There's no explosive devices. So like grenade launchers.
Destructive devices.
Yeah, but certain things are allowed, Danny, for destructive devices. So if it's over 50 caliber, you actually can own it in Illinois. It is not on the list of banned items, but you just have to follow the federal laws for it. And then, but like with anything else, there's always loopholes in Illinois. Those items are banned for individual ownership, but they're not banned for company ownership. So if you founded a company and paid the taxes on it, then you can own those. Well, the company can own those firearms. You see how that works, Cuno?
Very interesting. So I guess they're more interested in the tax revenue then.
Hey, you figured it out. Wait, so it's not about safety, it's about taxes? What?
Can't be about money, right?
So, and then also, individuals in Illinois are required to have a firearm owner's identification, a FOID, and that is a card that you register. It's good for 10 years, and it's only $10 to $15. I can't remember what it was. It was almost 10 years ago when I got mine. But you have to have that in order to own firearms and to purchase them from other Illinois residents. I don't have to have it to purchase it for other firearms out of the state, but I have to have it to have them in the state. So a little wonky. But unlike an acquisition permit, I do not have to register the firearm to the state. I have to, whenever an individual sells to somebody else in Illinois, each individual has to go and take the other's FOID number and go to the state police's website and enter that information, and then it'll come back and say, okay, this person's okay to sell and buy from, and then you have a wait period, and then it's a private sale. It's fine.
I see. So how about carrying a firearm in Illinois?
Concealed carry is allowed, but you have to have a permit, and you have to complete classes, and the permit costs money, obviously.
Is it a shall issue state, isn't it?
It was the last state, I think. It was the last state that had concealed carry banned, but then it was overthrown by a federal judge or a state judge. I can't remember.
So it was a may issue, and then it turned into a shall issue?
I don't know what that means.
So shall issue states are states that usually it says in the law that like the state government shall issue you this license if you do the paperwork. Yeah. It means like you can't be turned down for unless like you're a felon. The may issue state, so like California is a may issue state. So when you apply for a license to carry in California, you have to have a very good reason in order to get the license. So in California,
became a shall issue.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So like in California, you basically have to have like documented like death threats against you in order to get a license to carry it.
No, it's not that bad. As long as they get their money and you complete the courses, which cost a lot of money too, then you're good. But it's also, I think it's only 3 years, the permit, 3 or 4 years. So and then you have to redo all the classes, and then you have to redo all the paying of the permit. So it's very expensive, which is weird how it comes down to money again.
How much it is?
Yeah,
Not off the top of my head. It's not something I'm interested in. I don't own any pistols, so it's not something I really particularly care about. But I know that I wouldn't be surprised to say it was between $300 to $500 each time you have to renew it.
That's pretty crazy.
And that that's including the classes that you have to take, which are, I think, all day. I think it's 8-hour classes that you have to have a certain number of.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then the permit itself.
And Cuno, just as like an example of just sort of how drastic the firearms laws in the United States can vary from state to state. So that's all in Illinois. And my state, Missouri, it's right next to Illinois. And here we don't need a firearms ID. So I don't need an ID to buy privately. So anybody that lives in Missouri, as long as you're not a criminal, you could just buy and sell guns. So I can just buy a gun from anyone. I can go to a gun store. I don't need a license. I can just fill out some paperwork, do a background check, and I can buy from a gun store that way. I don't need a license to carry a handgun for self-defense here. So in Missouri, you could just carry a pistol with you wherever you go.
Concealed carry, though, right?
Both. There's open carry is also allowed. So if I wanted to, yeah, I can open carry a pistol on my side, or I can conceal carry it. I'm not a big open carry fan. I'm a concealed carrier, so since I turned 21, which is how old you have to be in Florida in order to get a license to carry. Or since I turned 21, I've been carrying a concealed firearm, which the area I came from in Florida, my hometown, the poverty rate is twice the national average. So it's a little bit of a necessity, I think, over there. But just an example of how drastically different like the gun laws can be in just state to state.
And then Danny, the other thing is that Cuno, the Illinois permit is not good in every single state.
I see. Yeah.
So you have 50 states, and some states have agreements so that they'll honor each other's permits, but not all of them do. So it's like some states will have, there's like a coalition of 10 to 15 states that all agree that, okay, we'll meet this standard of a permit. So anybody in these states that's issued a permit, it's okay for them to be in any other state with that same agreement with the concealed firearm, but not all of them. So it gets even more confusing.
Poor Cuno.
Well,
it's already hard enough, probably in just one country, let alone 50 states in one.
Well, at least you guys can move if you want more lenient gun laws.
Yeah, I guess that is true for now, at least.
Well, see, in Switzerland, it is there is such a thing as a license to carry a firearm, but we don't really make the distinction between concealed or open carry. Open carry is, if you have that particular license, you could open carry, but people will call the cops on you if you showed up somewhere. So this is really not an option. And to get a concealed carry license is really only possible if you need it for work. Let's say you work as a security guard and you need to carry a firearm for your work, or if there are death threats against you and that kind of stuff. But I don't really know of anybody who didn't need it professionally who was issued a carry license, because in a lot of, especially Americans, they believe that open carry is a thing here because they see those pictures of teenagers riding their bicycles with a military rifle slung to their back. But that is not carrying a rifle, because we're only allowed to transport a rifle with unloaded rifle, of course, and the ammunition has to be in a different bag or container. It has to be physically separate from the rifle, and we're only allowed to transport the weapon to and from the place where we have business with it, which means, I can transport it from my home to the range and back. But it's already illegal if I stop at a restaurant on my way back and leave the rifle in the car. That would also be illegal because I have to go straight home.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. There's something like that in the U.S. law, where you kind of have to do the same thing. If I was in the U.S., like it's kind of more with machine guns, but it's similar. If I owned a machine gun, say I wanted to drive from Pennsylvania to Maine, I would be driving through states like New York where machine guns aren't legal, and you can't with the Form 20 can technically be transporting it through New York, but you can't stop anywhere. You can't stop and eat. You can't do anything like that. You pretty much have to drive straight through that state to get to where you're getting. So that is interesting. Yeah.
And it gets really funky with bayonets because we have a ban on daggers, and in the Swiss law, the definition of a dagger is a knife with a symmetrical blade that's shorter than about a foot. It's 30 centimeters, and it's a little less than a foot. And that would mean that a model 1918 Swiss bayonet would be illegal. So they had to make an exception for Swiss military bayonets. And that means that you don't need a permit to own them. You don't need a permit to buy them. So everything is fine, but they're still considered a weapon. So the same restrictions about transport apply. And I've heard of a guy, he was cleaning out the attic of his tenant that had left the apartment, and he found an old Swiss bayonet, and he meant to give it back to the tenant that had left the apartment, and he just threw it in his trunk, and he drove around with the bayonet in his trunk for a few weeks. And he got into it. The police pulled him over. They found the bayonet, and that was actually, that was a felony.
Oh wow! Having a bayonet in your car.
Yeah, it's because he was illegally transporting a weapon, and you can imagine with all Swiss bayonets are everywhere. A lot of people have them in their attics and their basements. That's grandpa's bayonet that's still somewhere in a trunk or something. And people are not even aware that it's still considered a weapon according to the law. And it also gets tricky for collectors because I just recently talked to a bayonet collector in Switzerland. He told me about some foreign military bayonet he just bought. And I said, well, did you have to file for a special permit? And he says, what do you mean permit? I said, well, only, Swiss bayonets are exempt. You need a special permit to buy a foreign military bayonet if it is, if it has a symmetrical blade and is shorter than about a foot. So you have to be real careful. And sometimes, sometimes I have to ask if the law applies to a certain bayonet or it doesn't. It's so complicated.
Oh, that does sound really complicated.
It seems like your bayonet laws are more complicated than the gun laws. Well,
the problem is, there are certain types of knives that are banned, and I guess the lawmakers they kind of figured that because a dagger didn't really have much other use than to stab someone, they were more dangerous than a butcher's knife for some reason. So they banned them all. And of course, when they were writing the new law and they banned them, somebody said, wait a minute, we're still issuing officers' daggers, to Swiss Army officers. We have to exempt them because we can't make them illegal. They're still officially, you still receive them when you become an officer. So they had to exempt that. And then they realized, wait a minute, bayonets kind of look like daggers and they have a symmetrical blade, so they had to exempt those too. But even though they exempt them, they're still considered weapons, and you can't just strap a bayonet to your hip and walk through town. That would be highly illegal. And the funny thing with the officer's dagger is that because they had to exempt that, it is actually the only dagger you can legally own and purchase in Switzerland without a permit. If it was a World War II dagger from Germany, you'd need a special permit to buy and own it.
Is the permit along the same lines as the gun permit?
It is. I think it's the same permit you need for a full auto gun and for a silencer, because it's basically it's a banned weapon. That's what it is. It's in the same category. And those permits, if I'm not mistaken, they cost $100, and you can only, buy a single weapon with them. So it gets kind of expensive, especially if, let's say, you want to buy a silencer for a small caliber rifle, then the permit's usually more expensive than the silencer.
Oh, yeah, it's only to buy a silencer here, it's only a $200 tax. Not too, but the crazy thing is,
it's not banned in the state.
It's not banned in the state, yeah. So if you live in like a more free state, you can do it. But the weird thing is that it's been $200 since 1934. So in 1934, $200 was it was the equivalent of like thousands, and I forgot like $1,300.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and they didn't write in the law to adjust it with inflation. It's just been a flat $200. So technically, $200 gets less and less every year. And,
sure, but it's still, it still seems expensive. I mean, in Switzerland, it's $100.
Yeah, it is. It's still kind of expensive. It's one of the things to consider when doing it. But I did it. I paid the $200 tax to get a short-barreled rifle, and which is any rifle with the barrel less than 16 inches. If you want it, you have to pay the $200 and that. And I did that, and it was the cheapest part of the whole build. I'll put it that way.
Right. Well, they we don't have that thing with short rifles here. They were completely. They were not regulated at all before the European Firearms Directive became law. You could didn't matter how short or long the rifle was. Didn't matter if it had a folding stock or anything. So they were just considered like any other firearm in the same category. But they changed that now because the EU Firearms Directive stipulates that if it has a folding stock and it's shorter than 60 centimeters, which is a little less than 2 feet, with the stock extended, then it's also a banned weapon. So you can still get them. They also need a special permit, but it's a bit more difficult to explain why you need them. I mean, for collectors, it's not a problem, and for sport shooters who do IPSec, for example, they can also explain why they need it. But for a regular sports shooter, because in Switzerland it's the most common sports shooting competitions are with military rifles, and that is the military, because in Switzerland, if you're in the military, you basically, the way it works is you get drafted when you're 19, and then you go in, do your basic training, and then you go back every year for, they call it a repeater class. Basically, you go back for 2 weeks or 3 weeks every year, depending on exactly what you do. And then you do that until you turn 35, and then you basically, you're not active military anymore after that. and while you're still active, you have to do a mandatory shooting program every year. And the military made sure that, to subsidize shooting clubs. And that's why we have over 2,000 rifle clubs in Switzerland for military rifle. And because, they had to make sure that they had to go somewhere to shoot their mandatory shooting program.
It's interesting. So you get paid time off and everything for that 2 or 3 weeks, whatever, every year.
Yes, exactly. And that's just for a regular soldier. If you're an officer, then you do a lot more time. And it actually used to be, a bit of a status. That was in Switzerland. It would alleviate your status to be an officer, and so management types they would basically start out in the military and become officers, and they would get their first free management training in the military. And in Switzerland, we don't have commissioned officers. Basically, everybody starts out in basic training as a recruit. And then depending on how well you do, they may ask you to continue and go to, first it's like NCO school, and then you can go to officer school and become an officer. It's just a lot more training you need to become an officer. But in Switzerland, every member of the Swiss Armed Forces, up to our generals, they all started out the exact same way as a recruit when they were 19.
That's neat.
So what about is the the price and availability of ammunition? Switzerland is
is ammunition, are you free to purchase it pretty much if you own the gun, or
Well, it's free to purchase. You don't even need to own a gun. It's basically what the seller has to make sure that you don't have a criminal record. So, the dealers, they aren't exactly required to ask for your criminal record, but they usually do just to cover their butts. So they file it with their paperwork, and in Switzerland it costs 20 francs to get an excerpt, from you to get your criminal record printed out, and it's valid for 3 months, and then you have to get another one. But as soon as a dealer knows you and has your paperwork, they will usually sell you ammunition freely. In Switzerland, you have to make the distinction between Swiss military ammunition like GP11 and GP90, because that is subsidized by the government and sold only to official clubs. As a private citizen, it's impossible for me to go out and buy GP11 in a store. They're not allowed to sell it. I have to go to an official shooting range, and I can buy it there at a discount. A round of GP11 and GP90 costs between 40 and 50 cents, depending on the club. They usually, make a little money on their ammunition, and technically you have to use it at the range. You're not supposed to take it home.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The GP11 is one of those rounds that's really gone up in the U.S. in price.
Yeah, I'm actually not 100% sure how it's being exported from Switzerland, because dealers can't just buy it and export it. So I guess the Swiss government will export some once in a while, but I have no idea how that works.
Yeah, I'm really curious. The company, I guess,
it's interesting.
I think if you have enough money, you can do whatever you want.
They must. The company, that's bringing it into the U.S. They must know somebody in the Swiss government or something.
Probably. And if you wanna buy 7.5 by 55 Swiss ammunition in Switzerland privately, then you just buy the same type of ammo that you get in the US, made by PPU or whoever.
Man, PPU,
those manufacturers, or
they got a stranglehold on the Milsurp market, don't they?
Yeah, I think they're one of the few.
Well, they saw a market hole and they filled it for sure.
Yeah, I guess which is good for us because we get all this, really what should be really rare and uncommon ammunition. Yeah, luckily we get it. How is shooting in Switzerland? So if you wanted to, you have a gun, you want to go shooting, are you pretty much limited to like shooting ranges and shooting clubs?
Well, in practical terms, yes, because the law says that you can shoot a gun on private property, as long as the noise doesn't bother anyone, and as long as you make sure that your property isn't accessible. You need to have a fence around it. And then you also have to make sure that it's impossible for the bullet to leave your property.
Okay.
And you can imagine, Switzerland is small, and there are buildings everywhere. So it's, for a private citizen, it's practically impossible to shoot on his own land, because nobody owns that much land to make sure the bullet can't possibly leave the property. So obviously that's impossible. And also, you start shooting, somebody will call the cops. There's just too many people in Switzerland, and there are a lot of people who are anti-gun and afraid of guns. So it's forget shooting on your private property. I do shoot small caliber rifles in my garage, but that's pretty much the extent of it. And if you want to shoot, you have to go to a range. And in Switzerland, there are the official rifle and pistol clubs, that the military subsidizes, and you have to become a member. And it's really, really cheap to become a member. It's like $50 to $100 a year that you pay in membership fees. But then you're usually expected to help with the maintenance of the range, and it's a club where everybody chips in and you work together. And at those clubs, they also do those mandatory shootings for soldiers and everything. They're usually 300-meter rifle ranges and 25 and 50-meter pistol ranges. The problem with those ranges is you're officially only allowed to shoot Swiss military firearms. So you can't really show up with your 454 Cazul revolver. People will look at you very funny. And so if you own guns other than Swiss military, you have to go to a private range. There are indoor range. Most of them are indoor ranges. There are some hunting ranges that are outdoors, but most others are indoor. And we have a really big one that's inside a mountain that sometimes pictures go around on Facebook of that one where you literally have, they tunneled into the mountain and put many different types of ranges in there, including a 300-meter rifle range where you literally shoot into a tunnel.
Yeah, that's really neat. I guess if land, the supply of land is really that short, you have to go underground.
So if you get lucky and you join a club and the president is nice, they will sometimes let you shoot other Milsurps, but it really depends on the club, and it's it's not officially allowed, but in some ranges will let you do it anyway. And there's also the thing they came out with some new regulations concerning outdoor ranges, because our range pretty old, and we were still basically shooting into a mound of dirt, and that became illegal. They're worried about lead getting into the groundwater, so not only did we have to get those bullet catcher boxes installed, but we also have to have the soil dug up, and basically what they're going to do is they did some measurements where the lead is and how bad it is, and we will have to have everything dug up, put on a truck, driven through most of Switzerland to a company specialized in cleaning soil, and then they will bring the soil back. And it all the outdoor ranges in Switzerland have to do that, and I think our range alone, it will cost way over $100,000 to do that.
Wow, I could see that making the price of a shooting range go up.
Well, so it's Switzerland, and the military is interested in keeping those ranges open. So the federal government pays part of it. The local governments pay part of it. The towns have to pay part of it. And basically, if the club has some money, they have to pay part of it. But if you just don't really have any money, they will not close the club because of that. Then the public will just have to pay for it.
Yeah. So if you wanted to take your Swedish Mauser to a shooting range, what would you have to do?
Well, basically, I would either have to go to a private one, and they're usually 100-meter ranges that are indoor or even underground, or I would take it to my local 300-meter club that is subsidized by the military, and I would just have to ask very nicely.
I guess it's good that it is possible, at least.
Yeah, it depends. If you're a member of the right club, then a lot is possible, and if you're in the wrong club, then you may just be stuck with Swiss rifles and pistols.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that does explain then why so many people in Switzerland shoot Swiss stuff, because that's all the great majority of the shooting competitions and everything that I see in Switzerland are all using Swiss firearms. So
exactly. I mean, that also explains why most Swiss firearms are completely over-engineered for precision, for accuracy. That's exactly the reason why when the K11 came out, the competition shooters, they just turned their noses up at it and said it's unusable for us. It's not accurate enough. So they already wanted to get rid of the long infantry rifles back then, but they couldn't really because of the competition shooters. And then when the K31 was designed, that was one of the specifications was that it had to be as long as the K11, but they have the same accuracy as an infantry rifle. So that's basically why, it also explains the Sturmgewehr 57. It explains the Sturmgewehr 90. They just need to be very accurate out to 300 meters, or they don't work in Switzerland.
Yeah. Is the focus on firearms training there? Is it more just accuracy above everything else? Is there any military style of shooting and moving, shooting over or under barricades or anything?
Oh yeah, I mean there are also clubs for that you can join. Most people get their first firearms training in the military, obviously, and the military does both 300-meter precision shooting and, of course, combat style shooting. You're also getting trained in moving and shooting, and shooting prone, kneeling, behind cover, and so on. I mean, it's just the regular military training that we have here too. So there's clubs for everything here. You can, there are IPSec clubs. You can go skeet shooting. There's everything. It's just that the military rifle competition and pistol competitions are the most common. They're most easily available. You can literally just go to your local range, and start shooting military rifles. And they also, because we have a militia system where military service is mandatory for men, not for women, but for men. The military is also interested in getting teenagers started early. So the clubs offer military rifle classes that you can join when you turn 15 years of age. So they, that also explains why you sometimes see pictures of teenagers with military rifles riding the bicycle. That's where they go. They go to training.
They're just going from their house to the training, carrying the rifle on their back.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen the picture circulated for a long time. We kind of talked about it a bit of, like I saw it was a Swiss person in a grocery store shopping with the rifle on their back. I think it was a SIG 550 or something.
Yeah, that, if you're in civilian clothing, that somebody will call the cops. You cannot do that anymore. I mean, especially in the country, you still see people carrying their rifle to the range or riding the bicycle, or walking. That is accepted, usually not a problem. It's a bit more difficult in the bigger cities. I mean, it was very common for people to just get onto public transportation with their rifle to get to the range, and that may still be possible in a country, but in bigger cities, it's a problem because people are so nervous. Even though Switzerland has very little gun crime, people still get very nervous today if they see a person in civilian clothing carrying a firearm. It's kind of funny because when we turn 19 years old, we have to join the military, and they give us a select fire military rifle to take home and keep at home with us. So in case war breaks out, we just grab the rifle and put our uniforms on, because all the gear you keep at home. So you're basically ready to. The call comes, you're ready to put your uniform on, grab your rifle and start fighting. They would even give you ammunition to keep at home. They stopped that in 2008 because there were some shootings, and so they got worried that military ammunition would be used for that. It doesn't really make much sense then, because you can still privately buy ammunition. So but military felt it looked better if they stopped giving the soldier ammunition to keep at home. And the ammunition was literally in a can that was closed, and it was a felony to open it unless there was a war and you were ordered to do so. So when I was a young man, I had my Sturmgewehr 57 in my closet with a can of GP11. And, you just knew there was no way you would ever open that, or you would go to prison.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. But you're still issued a rifle if you're in the military, but they just don't give you any ammo for the rifle. So
exactly. And you still take it home. You don't, it used to be that you had to take your rifle home and keep it at home. And they changed that now. If you don't feel comfortable, or you live you share an apartment with other people, and you don't have a gun safe, then they allow you to just keep it in the arsenal. And you have to go pick it up every time you go in for training. But a lot of people still have it at home, and considering how difficult it is to get a full auto gun, it's kind of funny that every 19 to 35-year-old who's in the military has one at home.
Yeah. That's kind of funny. So are you allowed to, so if you're issued one of those and it's at your home, are you allowed to take that to the range just on your own, like if you just wanted to?
Yes. I mean, you're not only allowed, you're encouraged to do so. I mean, like I mentioned, there's this mandatory shooting program you have to do once a year. But if you're a competition shooter and you're in the you join a club, then you will use your military rifle for competitions.
Are you allowed to shoot it full auto as well, or are you limited?
No, you're not. No, you're not. That's not only are full auto guns heavily regulated, shooting them is regulated as well. So, you shoot them in a military, but if you want to shoot them full auto privately, not only does the range need a permit to let you do it, you also need a permit every time you want to do it.
Wow.
And the permit also costs 100 francs. So, whether you get the permit or not kind of depends on where you live, because even though the gun laws are federal, the individual cantons have some leeway on how, whether they'll issue them freely or if they're more strict with them. In the area where I live, I know it's possible to get it, and I know they have clubs where they organize full auto shoots. Everybody gets their permit and they get one for the range, and then they go shoot full auto. So in my area, it's possible. If you're in a different area, I hear it's almost impossible to get the permit, and no range will even let you do it. So I personally don't own any full auto guns, so this is just what I'm told.
You could take your full auto issued rifle to a range, no full auto shooting though.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
And you have to, the Sturmgewehr 57 and also the Sturmgewehr 90, they have like the lever or something to disable full auto, and that has to be on while you're in the range. You're not. You basically have to disable the full auto capability to shoot at a range, and it's easily done. It's not a big deal, but if you forget, they will point it out to you.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Because I was going to ask, like, what happens if somebody accidentally a full auto?
Well, it is a felony. So I'm the people running the club probably would not call the cops on you if it was just an honest mistake. But if somebody just walked in there and started shooting full auto like crazy, that would be something the police would be called.
Oh, it's very interesting. Like, it's very the firearms laws there are very very deep.
Yeah, it's actually every time there are changes. And especially with the European Union Firearms Directive, because obviously the European Union, they don't know our system and they could care less about it. So we had to make sure we could adopt those laws, because we had to, unless we wanted to break the open treaty border we have with the European Union. And a lot of gun owners were ready to do it. So there was a referendum on it and we voted on it. But unfortunately, we lost because, people thought they were afraid. There's also, they were afraid it would be more complicated to travel abroad and to cross the borders. And there's also a part of the agreement is that police forces work together from all the members of the treaty. And so they were basically telling us, Switzerland would lose access to the European crime databases and how that would make it more difficult for police, and Switzerland, there would be more crime as a result. So as usual, it probably wouldn't have been as bad as they told us, but they just wanted to get people scared, so they would vote for more gun control.
Yep.
But that's that is always a challenge for Swiss gun laws to make sure there are the proper exceptions for Swiss military rifles, because they did ban full auto guns, but they couldn't ban the Swiss military rifles that people kept at home, so they had to make exceptions for that. And I think it's the same in the US here. If a full auto gun is always a full auto gun, even if you have it converted to semi-auto, you still need it still falls under the banned guns, and you need to get a special permit to own it because it used to be full auto. The Swiss rifles are the only exceptions. So, if you finish your military service and you're still able to keep your personal rifle, you just have to, there's certain, you have to show that you did all your mandatory shooting practices and that you shot the field shooting events and everything. And then you have to get a permit. And I think they charge $100 these days for your personal rifle if you want to keep it. And then it will be converted to semi-auto, and you can actually get it with a regular acquisition permit. You do not need a special permit that you would need for any other full auto gun that was converted to semi-auto. Now with the European Union Firearms Directive, it became a bit more difficult because they could still have the exception that you could get your rifle from the military that was converted to semi-auto. But as soon as you sold it to somebody else, that person would need a special permit because it's a full auto rifle that was converted to semi-auto. So everything just got more complicated.
Yeah. Oh, it's all very interesting. That's one of the sort of just getting into like the languages and stuff. One of the things that kind of limits, I think, a lot of U.S. collectors to like certain information is just that we don't speak a lot of the languages that a lot of the books or maybe original documentation is written in. So, like Aaron being a big fan of the Mannlicher rifles, it's a lot of that original books and everything is in German and I think Hungarian. There's some stuff written in Hungarian.
Yes.
Or Bulgarian.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of stuck. And it's not exactly a popular firearm collecting group in the United States, so it's not really something that's people are going to make money selling a book on them. So it's not going to be something unless it's like a passion project from somebody to translate stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So Aaron, if since you're a Mannlicher guy, do you have a Swiss 1893 cavalry carbine?
No, but Danny does.
Yeah, I saw that one in the video.
I'm actually more of an M95 fan than I am of just Mannlicher in general.
Okay. Well, those are actually the 1893s. Those are pretty expensive in Switzerland too.
Well, they didn't make
yeah.
very many of them, did they?
No, they didn't, and they didn't use them for very long because the soldiers didn't really like them too much. They had some trouble getting the bolt assembled after cleaning them, and so it was basically a failure. And so they're kind of rare, and collectors look for them, and they usually go for around $500 or so here, which for a Swiss military rifle is very expensive for Swiss standards.
Yeah. So it's the takedown is pretty much, I think, identical on the 1893 and the 1895 liquor. So it's kind of it is overly complicated. When you do it, you will probably say a 4-letter word or two. Your fingers will hurt, and
yeah, that's what I usually do.
That's not so bad once you get used to it. I mean, look in the main chat again, Cuno, and you can see my collection of M95s.
Oh wow, you have a lot of them.
I have 8 now.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Well, I do have an M95 24, which is a variation, obviously. But once you get used to it,
the best variation.
You can argue that it's not, Danny, because of the clip falling out, but whatever. I mean, it wasn't exactly meant for long-term use, Danny.
Well, I mean that was the problem. It was just so different from everything Swiss soldiers were used to that they just had a hard time with it. I mean, of course, if you shoot them a lot, then you get used to it. And it's actually a funny story how I got my 1893 cavalry carbine, because I was looking for one, and I'm cheap. I didn't want to spend 500 francs. So I was contacted by an old gentleman who was looking to sell off his collection. And he told me on the phone that he had, everything from the K31 going back to the 1842 percussion infantry rifle, and everything in between, including, Vetterli and Milbank Amsler breech loading conversions. And it turns out he even had some French and Belgium flintlock rifles that were probably used in local militias in Switzerland. I mean, it was a amazing collection of about 20 rifles. And I told him, look, I don't really have the room to buy all those rifles from you. And it would be impossible for me to pay you a fair price, because I don't have the funds at the moment to buy such a great collection. And but I would be interested in buying the 1893 and the Vetterli. He had a Model 71 Vetterli Stutzer in amazing condition. So I went to look at it, and we agreed I would buy the Vetterli and the cavalry carbine. And he was really nice, and he accepted a pretty low offer. And so for some, I don't remember exactly the reason, but I couldn't pick him up that day, so I had to come back a week later. So I made an appointment, and I went to pick those 2 rifles up, and he tells me, "Look, I would like to make you an offer." And I said, "Well, that's really nice of you, but I still don't really have the room to put them anywhere. So, even if you make me an amazing offer, it may not work for me." And he says, "Listen to me first. I would like to sell you the whole collection for 1,000 francs.
Oh.
And so, I just looked at him and said, "Okay, I got to talk to my wife. She's waiting in the car. I'll be right back." So I went downstairs, explained it to my wife, and said, I really don't know where we would put them. And she said, "You fool, go for it. We'll figure it out later." That's why I love my wife. And so I went back. I told him he had a deal if he let me have his rifle stands. And he just laughed and said, "Hey, I don't need them anymore. Take them." And that's basically how I got started on my Swiss rifle collection, especially anything older than World War I. Before my oldest Swiss rifle was a K11, and he really got me started on the older stuff. So I got very lucky there.
Oh wow, that's quite that is quite the deal.
Yeah, that was definitely. He was just he liked that I appreciated the rifles, and he knew that that I would take good care of them, and he trusted me not to just buy them and sell them off to the highest bidder. And I still have every single one of them. I will never sell them.
Yeah, that's really nice. It's really nice to have like your wife's support doing something like that.
Yeah, I'm very happy about that. The only problem with my wife is that she usually beats me at shooting competitions, which can be a bit annoying.
That is a great problem to have, though. I think a lot of people, a lot of guys tend to just not realize maybe how good of natural shooters women can be.
Yes, they tend to be. It's interesting when I mentioned my wife is from the U.S. originally, and she came to Switzerland. She hadn't really, shot any guns in the U.S. before she came to Switzerland. So she, after we inherited my father's collection and we started shooting pistols, she took a class, and the instructor later told me that he loves to teach women because they listen. They try to do what you tell them, and unlike men, they don't think they know better.
Yeah, it's a big thing. That's really cool. I don't know. Yeah, sometimes I think I push it, but my wife, luckily, she puts up with my my collecting. She agrees that it's a little bit more than just a hobby, and it goes into borderline obsession because I am constantly talking about it, reading about it, looking them up. It's just
I still can't believe. Sorry, Kuno.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say I still can't believe I got my wife to agree to buy the Lee Navy.
So it was expensive, I take it.
$2,000.
Okay, yeah, that's expensive.
It's a lot of money, but it was still a good deal.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can look at it as an investment, and if you have the funds, then sure.
Yeah, that's the way to look at it. It's definitely an investment, and that's kind of how I look at my military surplus collection in a way. Is it's an investment. It's it's inflation proof. A lot of these old bolt actions and everything, they're never going to get banned. So it's not like you have to worry about any sort of legal constraints in the future. My plan is once I get 65 or 70 or something like that, I'll probably sell them all.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to do when I retire, to sell off some of the collection. And I see the picture of your Lee Navy. That's excellent.
Yeah, so that's a weird action. That's a camming action, although it's considered a straight pull because you don't turn the bolt, but it's not really a straight pull.
Yeah, I'd love to have one, but probably impossible to find here. And then the price would be outrageous. What I'm still looking for is a Zielfernrohrkarabiner 55. Just the scoped model 55 bolt action. They're available, but in Switzerland, they started around $2,500, and it's just still a little rich for me to spend on a single rifle. So I'm still hoping I'll find an old widow somewhere with a huge collection, and she maybe she'll like me enough to make me a good deal. Who knows?
Yeah, for a lot of those guns, that's kind of, you don't want to pay an arm and a leg for. That's kind of what you have to wait for.
Yeah, I was actually at an old lady's house the other day. She was 90 years old, and she had some old Swiss rifles hanging on the wall from her late husband. And she told me that one rifle was already gone because she had her kitchen floor redone. And you have to know that labor is very expensive in Switzerland. So it's expensive to have anything done on your house. So the guy was working on her floor, and he saw a rifle hanging on the wall, and he told her he would do the job for free and take the rifle for payment.
Good.
Yeah, I assume it must have been something really, valuable, but she couldn't remember what it was, so I couldn't find out what it was, and they probably didn't do the paperwork either. So
Yeah.
I will never know what it was, but I would have loved to find out.
Oh.
All right, well, I've got to get going, Danny. We've been
Yeah.
chatting for about 2
lunch.
hours.
Oh yeah, it has been. Wow. Yeah, time flies.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun.
Well,
Yeah,
before we
yeah.
go, Cuno, what is your favorite Swiss bolt-action rifle?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer.
I know it is.
Well, what I did for this year's shooting season, which didn't really happen because of the coronavirus. It started recently, so we're shooting now, but I haven't really gotten into it much. I set up a infantry rifle 1911, with target sights, and I want to use it for all the competition shooting this year. So that is one of my favorites. I mean, I love the K31s, but they're very common, and a lot of people still shoot them for competition. So I want to try something a little different, and I'm very partial to the infantry rifle 11, but I also love the Vetterli rifle. So there's always those questions in those Facebook groups, if you had to give up all your guns, which one would you keep? And I can never answer it. I just I love them all, and some more than others, but there are way too many to just narrow it down to a handful.
Yeah, that's a pretty good answer. It's kind of like, not sure which one I could do either. I inherited a pistol from my grandpa that he brought back from World War II. That one I would probably have to do that one, but if it wasn't for that, I think I would do my M1.
Yeah, I mean, one of the guns that I would definitely always hang on to, that was a SIG P210, a private series, a pistol that my father bought brand new, and I inherited from him. And of course, first thing I did was take it to the shooting range and shoot it. And I still use it for pistol competitions, and that obviously is also a gun I will never be able to sell.
Can you guess what Aaron's favorite is?
Well, could it be a Mannlicher maybe?
No, it's actually a Siamese Mauser, Danny.
Okay.
While Cuno is here, it actually be a good way of clearing up the pronunciation of Mannlicher. So we say there's kind of a debate in the U.S. about the pronunciation. So it used to be pretty widely said people would pronounce it Mannlicher, because that's just sort of the spelling of it. But then kind of, I guess that, it sounds too funny. There's too many connotations with that pronunciation. So then certain people, certain YouTubers and everything started calling it the Mannlicher instead, because, in German, you wouldn't pronounce it as man, you'd probably pronounce it as Mann. Then I further said that, it's still incorrect because it's not pronounced liquor. So Mannlicher and Mannlicher are both incorrect, and trying to argue that one is more correct than the other is just kind of like it's a moot point sort of. But what's your opinion on that? Like, what do you think how it's pronounced?
Well, I mean, I don't really have an opinion, because I would say the German pronunciation probably applies, and that would be Mannlicher. It's because the ch in German is always a sound, so it's Mannlicher. And obviously in the US you will allow for differences in pronunciation and language. So I don't really have an opinion how you should pronounce it. When I lived in the US for a while, and my name was butchered a lot. Obviously, since I'm a German speaking person, I for me, the German pronunciation would be right. So, of course, it's also Porsche and not Porsche, and it's BMW and not BMW, and it's Volkswagen and not Volkswagen. So,
Yeah. Well, not to brag, but Americans are really good at mispronouncing words.
I think that's just English in general.
I bet English people aren't as bad as Americans. So.
Well, the pronunciation is quite different, so it makes it more difficult. It's actually interesting. I have never met an American who was able to learn regular German and pronounce it without an accent. It's usually you can hear it right away. But I have met Americans who moved to Switzerland and learned Swiss German and learned to pronounce Swiss German with barely an accent. So it seems to be closer to American English than regular German is.
One last thing before you go, Cuno. Check out the chat again.
That looks interesting. What is that?
That's an L1A1.
Oh, nice.
They didn't have those in Switzerland, obviously, because you have the SIG. But the FAL was pretty much universal, except in certain places like the U.S.
As far as I know, the Swiss military did look into it, but of course, the Swiss always have to do their own thing.
Surprised you sold that gun, Aaron, as much as you like it.
I like how it looks, and I liked the gun. And I didn't have a problem with the gun itself, actually, but I just wanted to specialize my collection, and it was worth it. I sold it to Sam, a friend of ours, and the price he bought it for, he could not have made it to what it was. So I think he obviously got a great deal out of it, and he loves it. He just appreciates it more, Danny. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I get that.
So it's his only semi-automatic firearm. Do you know that?
Yeah, I remember him saying that.
Yeah, so
it's an interesting thing. Bolt action versus semi-auto. I prefer shooting bolt actions. I would hate it if
I prefer a manipulation of some kind. Bolts.
Yeah, it's something about like having to work a bolt, like manipulate the firearm in between shots. I think it makes each shot more special.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I mean, I absolutely enjoy, shooting a Colt single action army, and it's just or also the old Swiss military revolvers. There's just something about having to manipulate it between shots, and I totally get what you're saying.
One of my favorite hog hunts I did with a bolt action, and that's when I kind of clicked that, because I've shot a lot of hogs with semi-autos before, and it's just kind of easy. You just keep pulling the trigger and you keep shooting them. But the element of having to work the bolt and then to sort of recite the target after that really does add like an extra sort of layer of like complexity and sporting to the whole thing. That was really interesting.
Yeah, it's also the thing here with military competition shooting, because I started out with the Sturmgewehr 90 because it was just the most modern, and I thought it would also be easier to shoot for my wife than a Sturmgewehr 57 or even a K31. And then we started shooting, and then it just never really, I never really felt that right, because I was trained with the Sturmgewehr 57, so I was just much more used to that one, and I feel it's easier to clean, and I can disassemble and assemble it blindfolded, because that's what we were practicing in the military. And so I started going back to the Sturmgewehr 57, and now I'm shooting bolt action. So it was a bit of a process. When the Sturmgewehr 90 came out, they actually stopped producing GP11 in Switzerland because they felt everybody would just switch to the new rifle and they wouldn't need GP11 anymore. And they started producing it again in 2016 because they realized sports shooters were not going away from GP11 anytime soon.
Yeah. They're making it again though now. I know American shooters are happy.
Yeah, we're we the ones we get from, that we get from the governments that are sold to the club are still 1990s production. So we haven't really moved into the new production yet. They're still we're still using up the old production.
Probably Americans buying it isn't helping it last any longer, but yeah.
Well, there's as far as I know, we have a lot of them, so it doesn't seem to be such a problem.
Danny, there's money to be made.
Yes, there is. I get this GP11.
All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap up, Danny, and we can talk a little bit after, but I need to get going here.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks, Cuno. Thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I really like the insight into the Swiss Firearms market and the Milsurp market specifically, and the gun laws. It's very interesting to hear about.
Well, thanks for having me, Danny and Aaron. I have fun.
Yeah, it's good. I like having different perspectives from different countries, especially ones that have vastly different stuff than the United States.
Yeah, and different, firearms traditions and different laws, and you can see how that.
I would say what we really picked up from Cuno's discussion is that the target shooting and the sport shooting community is very strong in Switzerland, where it's not as strong here.
It definitely is. I mean, one last number to throw out there. We have that yearly field shoot competition that's open to everybody. You don't need to own a gun. It's okay if you've never shot a gun. The clubs will loan you a pistol or a rifle or both, and you can shoot the competition, and somebody will tell you exactly what to do and help you. And that is a competition that's held all over Switzerland, over the course of a weekend, basically, and over 150,000 people compete in that competition every year.
Wow! Oh yeah, that's a lot. It's quite the 150,000. Yeah. So your population of Switzerland is like 8.5 million. So
yes, that's correct.
A lot. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks everyone for listening to us. I haven't mentioned them in a while, but this show is possible from by our sponsors on Patreon. Want to help support the show? It's just patreon.com/Milsurp World. If it wasn't for the Patreon supporters, you wouldn't have a show to listen to right now. So thanks to the supporters. Thanks again for coming on, Cuno.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot.